Well, you're most welcome to this talk, Thursday the 31st of March. Now, this is going to be an Africa update because what is going on there appears to be really good news. Essentially no cases in sub-Saharan Africa at the moment, and even South Africa. The cases have dropped really quite dramatically. But I want to unpick that a bit, and we'll be getting a report from Uganda as well, of course, in this video with first-hand information from Wafafa, who's a medical officer in Uganda. Now let's just start off by looking at this here. Now Africa, there's quite a few reports of this. This one's from the New York Times, but there's quite a few reports. This is put together from popular media mostly, which in itself I must say is disappointing. It's hard to get official much. You can get some official data from African governments, of course, but it's not really reflected in the Western media. I don't suppose it's considered to be very high priority, unfortunately. But we want to look at it because there's a lot of people live in Africa. Right, antibodies to SARS coronavirus 2, 65% at the end of 2021. Now, this 65% is based on various surveys, mostly sponsored by the World Health Organization. But it's also very variable, so you might get very high rates in some cities and very low rates in the countryside, or high rates in one demographic or lower rates in another demographic. But it does show that SARS coronavirus 2 has swept through Africa and has left lots and lots of people with antibodies, at least. These are antibody profiles. And of course, if they've got antibodies, that means they've had the virus. If they've had the virus, that means it's also stimulated the long-lived immunity from the B and the T lymphocytes, which is probably more important for viral infections. So pretty high, this is most countries. Now this paper here, SARS coronavirus 2 infection in Africa, a systematic review and meta-analysis of standardised seroprevalence, how common the antibodies are in people's sera. And this goes from January 2020, so that's right at the start, to December 2021. So this is the most up-to-date we've got. And now these are direct quotes from this paper. Now, this paper is sponsored primarily by the World Health Organization, so we can hope for very good quality data. We report high seroprevalence in Africa, so this is just remarkably good news that this has happened. And bear in mind, it's not because of any great coordinated international campaign to facilitate vaccination. By no means. I don't know the vaccination status of all of Africa, but in Uganda, it's about 11% for people that are doubly vaccinated. So this is not accounted for by vaccination. We can be quite clear about that. A little bit of it will be, but most of it is not. Most of it is natural infection. Interesting. And even if you're not interested in Africa, the implications of this for the rest of the world are quite profound. We appear to have virtually an entire continent which has developed very high levels of immunity, minuscule numbers of cases and people admitted at the moment without vaccination. If that doesn't give you pause to think about our strategy in Western rich countries, then we're not thinking about it. We have to be analytical. That must give us pause to think, just a minute, is there something to learn from Africa here? Suggesting greater proportion of exposure to SARS coronavirus 2 and protection against COVID-19 disease than indicated by surveillance data. In other words, antigen testing and looking for symptoms, but they're not to look for symptoms much, but mostly antigen testing, which of course has been pathetically low. And every time we reported from Africa, or had reports from Africa, we learn how low the testing is there. Very, very low, because of course testing is expensive. Relatively speaking, well, testing is expensive, full stop. Seroprevalence was heterogeneous. In other words, it was mixed, very mixed. Targeted vaccination strategies need to be tailored to local and epidemiological situations. Now, I think what they're saying there is, because the natural immunity is a bit patchy, some cities are good, some countryside areas are bad, therefore we need to target our vaccination strategies to those with low seroprevalence data. And my immediate reaction to this was, I've never heard a more arrogant statement in my life. So Omicron's done pretty well, but now 2 years later, we'll come along with vaccines and we'll just fix in the gaps that Omicron's left and the other strains have left. Resorting to this approach of Western high-tech medicine being the only approach again, the staggering arrogance of that, especially coming largely from the World Health Organization, which is, well, let's just say the competence of a lot of what they've said has been questionable, although of course there are thousands of really top-class workers on the ground. Some might suggest a lions led by donkeys situation. I'm not suggesting that, some might. Anyway, let's look at so this whole idea that, oh well, okay, you know, the creative order, nature's done well, but you know, fortunately we're here with our high tech, and we'll just fill in the gaps and make it a whole load better. I'll leave you to form your own opinion on that. Funding source, and we always have to look at the fund. Tragically, in papers these days. Actually, this one's not peer reviewed yet, but I've read it. It's a good study. Tragically, these days, we have to look at who's funding the research and actually take that into account to decide how valid the research is going to be. And that is perhaps the saddest statement I've ever made in this entire video series. It really is quite tragic that this needs to be done, and yet it does. As we looked at the other day when we looked at the delusion. The illusion, let's get it right, the illusion of evidence-based medicine from the British Medical Journal. I digress. So this is funded by the World Health Organization Solidarity Response Fund and the German Federal Ministry of Health. Fair enough. Only 14% had received any kind of vaccination, so we've got 65% with positivity, and only 14% had received even a first dose, any kind of vaccination. So this is all due to, or the balance, at least the balance is due to natural infection. Now, should we be targeting Africa with targeted vaccination now for a disease, as we'll see, that in Uganda and Kenya, for example, barely exists anymore? Should we be spending a few $1 billion on that? Has Africa got any other problems to worry about? Well, there's heartbreaking problems going on, of course. Malaria, the number of children that die from malaria is high. I don't know what it is. It's well over 1,000 a day. Malaria needs to be addressed. Absolutely, malaria needs to be addressed. Malnutrition needs to be addressed in its many forms. Tuberculosis is still a big problem in Africa, and even the multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. HIV still has a very high prevalence, and this can be readily treated with highly effective antiretroviral therapy. But not everyone gets it. That needs to be addressed. That's inexcusable. That really is quite inexcusable that everyone is not getting a very good quality treatment that's available. And as well as that, if we give people these highly effective antiretroviral drugs, it reduces their viral load massively. And if the viral load is low enough, basically that means that HIV is no longer transmissible. So this, as well as treating the individuals, giving individuals decades of more life, it is actually halting the progression of the pandemic. Not that we'd want to rely on that as a means, but it is a big factor. Parasitic disease, of course, is still a big problem. The traditional African diseases. Chest infections, very common, especially in children. Diarrhea and vomiting, very common gastrointestinal infections. Even the dread cholera is still around, sometimes in outbreaks, not there all the time. All of these cause dehydration. There's still some polio. I was going to say this is inexcusable, but the reason that polio is still there is not due to the fact that the campaigns haven't been there. For example, polio has been essentially eliminated in India, but not in Pakistan, because there's areas where the vaccination people for polio are intimidated, and violence is used against them, or threats of violence by particular groupings who have delusional ideas about the polio campaign. My age group, we've seen so many people with appalling disabilities as a result of polio throughout the world. It's a just downright awful disease, and yet not yet eradicated. So let's keep going with polio. Polio can be eradicated. That is possible. Measles is still a big killer in children. Meningitis is... can't describe how awful meningitis is. If you see patients with meningitis, they are just in agony. The pain in the head, the pain in the neck, the sickness, it's a terrible disease. This disease of the meninges, the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, the pia mater, that cover the central nervous system. And then, of course, that's not even to start thinking about all the birth-related things and the neonatal mortality. Now, The question remains, though. Delta killed millions in India, and when we looked at excess mortality, we saw that a lot more people died in India than on the official figures. A lot more. South Africa has had its waves the same as anywhere else. So what is the difference? So South Africa had kind of normal waves like Western countries. India, millions died from Delta, but in Africa, not so. What is the difference? Now, if we could find out what the difference was, I think that might be quite useful. I think a lot of it, well, certainly there's a younger demographic in Africa, no question that's a factor. But I think a lot of it is also innate immunity and cross-immunity from other pathogens. We need to learn this. And maybe we could be using almost a return to a sort of a variolation approach to managing disease. I'm not advocating that. We've done videos on that in the past. It's a historical technique where you expose people to the live disease to protect them. I'm not advocating that, I'm just talking out loud as I have a weakness to do. But we need to work out what the immunity is in Africa, how that immunity has been generated, to what degree that's cross-immunity, or what the heck is going on. Because basically, we don't know, and no one seems to have a good handle on this. So we simply don't know. So are we missing a trick from Africa data? Yeah, I think we are. So why South Africa? Why not other countries? Zimbabwe, Uganda, Nigeria to a large extent. There's been cases in Nigeria, or all the other sub-Saharan African countries. Very low prevalence. Why? So there's a mismatch in the data there. We need to explain it. Is it that African deaths are simply unrecorded? Because obviously we're dealing with less advanced technical cultures. But it's actually quite a bit... It's a ridiculous idea, really. The idea that death is less important to Africans than it is to anyone else is just ridiculous. So are African deaths simply unrecorded? Dr. Theo Baldi, WHO COVID emergency response in Africa. We've not seen massive burials in Africa, so they haven't seen the signs of this, which is good. If it happened, we'd have seen it. So, as if these African doctors and the entire population of Africa are going round and simply didn't notice that a few million people have died is absurd. And a lot of people are seriously saying this. It really is. Well, it is offensive, actually. It's borderline offensive. It's so ignorant. If what happened here, we'd have seen it. Of course we would. Of course, you're not going to miss people dying, are you? Dr. Abdullah Zabira, epidemiologist, Africa Population Health Research Centre in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, I have done a little bit of academic work in Nairobi, and I must say it is a very... and I haven't worked in hospitals in Nairobi, but I've certainly been in them and toured them. But the academia in Nairobi is very high, very sophisticated. So these people have sophisticated academic techniques as anywhere else. This guy will know. A death in Africa never goes unrecorded, as much as we are poor at record keeping. So, okay, the record keep is not where we'd like it to be, but we still know about deaths. If there's a funeral, an announcement, a burial is never done within a week because it's a big event. Well, this is true actually even in my somewhat limited experience of African culture. Quite unpleasant, really. Bodies can be left for a period of time before burial, with obvious consequences of that. Anyway, for someone sitting in New York, hypothesising that we were unrecorded, well, we may not have the accurate numbers, but we know. So, in other words, I think he's a bit nifty. You've got people hypothesising. Let's not pick on New York. Academics, London, Paris, Rome, wherever it is, they're unrecorded. Well, it's simply not feasible. It's palpable that it's not feasible. In the media and your social circle, you know if there are deaths. Of course you do. And just to reinforce that, Dr. Dembi, Sierra Leone Health Minister, we haven't had overflowing hospitals. We haven't. They just haven't. There's no evidence that deaths are occurring. So the reduction in deaths in sub-Saharan Africa is genuine. The question is why? Over to Rafa now, medical officer in Uganda. evidence-based report. Where am I looking at? Evidence-based report. Very well delivered. Rafafa's he's got the hang of this now. So let's go straight over to Rafafa now. And thank you, Rafafa, of course, as always.
Hello guys, welcome to today's update. I want us to talk about Africa, most especially East Africa, where I come from. Now, as most of you people have been following the updates that I give on this channel, know very well that the number of cases of COVID-19 in Uganda and East Africa at large has totally reduced. Now, this came following Omicron. We all know that Omicron is like a vaccine that we all failed to make. You know, whenever you are exposed to a disease, a body builds antibodies that help to fight the future infection. So when Omicron came in, I believe that many people were exposed and they got infected and recovered, and now they have protection, and that's why we are recording low cases of COVID-19 in Uganda and East Africa at large. Now with me here, I have some information for Kenya and Uganda. Let me first go through such that you know that whatever I'm speaking, I'm not just getting it from my head, but it is actually backed with data. So the current information that I have right now from the Ministry of Health Uganda and Kenya shows that yesterday Uganda confirmed 9 new cases and only about 2 people have been admitted. We only have 2 active cases right now across the whole nation. That is a very low number, but the 9 cases were confirmed from the total of 2,552, actually from 2,322 tests that were conducted, which gives us a positivity rate of 0.4%. So this number is very low. When you look at Kenya, you find that they also just reported 9 cases yesterday out of a total of around 3,255 cases tested, which gave them a positivity rate of around 0.3%. When you look at these 2 countries, you find that the cases reported are very low, to be explained by the low vaccination rates. So I attribute the decline or the decrease in the number of cases to Omicron, which was a gift from God. It is the vaccine that Africa failed to make and the whole world. Even Bill Gates, I think, acknowledged that when he was in a certain conference. He said that Omicron is giving protection just as vaccines. Even the CDC studies revealed that. The only thing that I disagree with him is that he said that, unfortunately, I don't think that has to be unfortunate. That should be good news for every person who loves humanity. Because if you've been infected by Omicron and they add you a vaccine, it doesn't reduce any chance of hospitalization. So I don't know whether it is ignorance or there is something that we don't know. Maybe when they vaccinate people, maybe the pharmaceutical companies, I really don't understand. But in my opinion, I don't think at the moment, according to the situation, I don't think Africa needs a vaccine. However, we have a lot of health-related challenges that need to be addressed, like malaria. We are losing a lot of children to malaria. We are losing a lot of pregnant mothers giving birth. So we need to use that money into other things. Instead of spending it on vaccinations, I believe they can put that money into fighting malaria and other health-related challenges. A day before yesterday, I was in a salon when I was reducing my hair, and I happened to get a chance of interacting with one of the government officials. He had come to also shave the hair. But when he came to the salon, he asked the barber to put on a mask first before he can shave. And then I asked him that, do you think a mask is important in preventing you from getting COVID-19 right now? And he said yes. So I was so surprised. So even most of the people who are in authority don't know this science. So maybe we need to take time and tell people to observe things. In most cases, people just hear maybe from WHO and they enforce it. But it is important for our health authorities to observe something that is happening, and then they do something that will help people. We know that every medicine has a side effect. Even a vaccine is a medicine, so it has a side effect. If people don't need it, I don't think there is need to force them to get it, because it is a medicine. So right now, I request all the people who are concerned to think about it, to thank God for the vaccine that we received from God, which was Omicron, and I will request them to divert the money that they are putting into buying vaccines into buying medicines that will need to maybe reducing malaria and building maybe hospitals and improving health generally to fight other conditions. Thank you very much for watching today's update. See you in the next video.
Well, I must say that's pretty hard to argue with. Rafafa understands the science. He's not seeing the cases on the ground. That's consistent with the government data. Now, when Rafafa says a saloon, we have the Wild West in mind with games of poker and give me a whiskey sort of thing. But I think he meant a salon, so that's fine. Where he was getting his haircut was the key thing. So 2 people in hospital in Uganda, 9 cases in all of Kenya. Now, when he was talking about Mr. Gates there, that was when Bill Gates said, unfortunately, I don't want to get him wrong, but he was talking about natural immunity, and he seems to infer the natural immunity was unfortunate. And the consensus of opinion there, I think, from you was that Mr. Gates misspoke. Anyway, but of course, if you'd like to fund our partner project in Uganda, we could save a lot of lives. Yeah, I think that's us for today. Thanks, Rafafa, and thank you for watching.